Imagine walking into a classroom where absolutely everything, from the history books you read to the artwork hanging on the walls, was designed specifically to reflect your heritage and empower your identity. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, our focus is on Afrocentric education, which is a genuinely fascinating and potentially transformative approach to learning. We're going to dive deep into the research to neutrally unpack the historical roots, the theoretical frameworks, and the real-world impacts of this model. Whether you're a parent, a student, or really just anyone invested in how we shape the next generation, our goal today is to break down these perspectives. By the end, you'll have a clear understanding of what this model actually is, how it operates on a daily basis, and why it's such a crucial part of the broader conversation about schooling right now.
Okay, let's kick things off by challenging a really common assumption. Whenever we talk about modern education, we constantly hear about the achievement gap. But the research actually asks us to consider a massive paradigm shift. Just imagine being evaluated your entire childhood in a system where the cultural norms, the historical references, and even the communication styles feel totally foreign to your home life. So, are documented disparities actually a reflection of some inherent student deficiency? Or are they a reflection of an educational system that is just failing to prioritize the academic, social, and cultural needs of Black students? Advocates for Afrocentric education suggest it's absolutely the latter, that the traditional system itself is what's dropping the ball when it comes to connecting with these learners.
Section 1. The education system's blind spot.
To really understand how we got here, we have to look at the structural blind spots baked into traditional schooling. And honestly, this isn't a new conversation at all. It traces all the way back to Dr. Carter G. Woodson's groundbreaking 1933 book, The Miseducation of the Negro, which highlighted this deep-rooted institutional resistance to centering Black history. Fast forward to today, and data suggests that traditional, colorblind metrics in early learning, like standardized tests, often wrongly signal that a student is deficient. Think about it. You've got a kid who is just this brilliant, vibrant storyteller at home, right? They're fluidly commanding complex language. But if that same kid struggles with a rigidly formatted multiple-choice reading test, the traditional system flags them as failing. Researchers argue those scores might actually just be highlighting the inadequacy of the tests themselves, because they rarely measure the multiple literacies or the cultural richness these children already possess.
So instead of focusing on what's supposedly missing, advocates for African-centered education, or ASE, completely flip the script. They adopt a profoundly asset-based mindset. The researcher Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III captured this shift perfectly. He noted that he had literally never met a Black child who wasn't a genius. His philosophy is amazing in its simplicity. He said there is no mystery in how to teach them. First, you treat them like human beings, and second, you love them. That is a massive departure from a system of constant testing and remediation. It replaces all of that with a foundational philosophy built on inherent potential.
Moving on to Section 2. Defining Afrocentricity.
So, how exactly do theorists define this alternative approach? Well, Afrocentricity is an educational theory and a frame of reference that views phenomena specifically from the perspective of African Americans, using their history and culture as the primary anchor point. Now, it's incredibly crucial to understand that Afrocentricity is not a rejection of wider knowledge, not at all. Rather, it's this deliberate, powerful change in the lens through which students view the world. It's kind of like reading a story. In a traditional curriculum, Black students are often taught history and literature in a way where they're relegated to being background characters in someone else's narrative. This framework totally changes that dynamic, allowing students to finally be the active protagonists of the discussion rather than just the object being discussed.
Section 3. Shifting the educational lens.
To see how this actually works in practice, we need to look at what exactly is shifting in the curriculum. Afrocentric scholars point out that traditional American education relies heavily on a Eurocentric lens. That basically means the focal point of human civilization, philosophy, and history is overwhelmingly centered on ancient Greece and a predominantly white, male perspective. Afrocentric education actively shifts that baseline. It centers ancient Kemet or Egyptian civilization as the starting point of reference. So you're analyzing history and science through an African perspective. By changing the starting line of human history, it fundamentally alters how students view their own place in the grand timeline of human achievement.
Now, making that kind of shift requires a totally different mindset from the teachers leading these classrooms. According to the research, educators in these environments hold some really distinct philosophies designed to foster positive racial identity and intellectual empowerment all at once. For instance, by rejecting those traditional Eurocentric notions of intelligence, they're free to incorporate open-ended outdoor learning that connects students directly to their environment. And this ties right into recognizing the sovereignty of the Black community and really honoring ancestral legacies. It's this holistic pursuit of academic excellence that doesn't force a student to leave their culture at the schoolhouse door.
Just think about the sheer psychological impact of this approach on a young learner. One ACE educator featured in the research expressed it perfectly, saying, "We built the pyramids. This is a key thing that our children won't know unless they go to an African-centered school." By foregrounding these massive historical assets, educators want students to know that excellence isn't just something they might acquire one day down the road. They teach that greatness and innovation are literally in their genetic makeup.
Section 4. Inside the ACE classroom.
All right, enough theory. Let's actually step inside one of these active African-centered classrooms to see what this looks like on the ground. First off, the day doesn't start with that sterile, jarring ring of a standard school bell. Instead, you might hear the sound of rhythmic drumming. You'll see students gathering in daily village circles, doing these energizing call-and-response chants. You look around, and the walls are covered in vibrant, culturally relevant art projects, celebrating the African continent in bright, bold colors. These are highly intentional choices designed to surround children with both implicit and explicit cultural affirmations from the literal second they walk in the door. Behind the scenes, the mechanics of this environment are built on two main pillars that feed directly into each other. First, you have structural features, which reorganize how the school physically operates. We're talking multi-age classrooms, securing flexible community funding, and bringing in elders for multi-generational support. Second, you have process features. These revolutionize the daily delivery of content. Now, you might wonder, why does a structural feature like flexible funding even matter? Well, it matters because it gives the school the freedom to invest in those process features, like teaching African languages such as Swahili, Yoruba, and Igbo, or bringing in artists for culturally affirming murals. Basically, the structure creates the space for the process to thrive.
The end goal of combining these structural and process features is total, holistic development based on communitarian principles. Think about the traditional individualistic schooling most of us grew up with. Sitting quietly at an isolated desk, competing against your peers for a grade. In an ACE school, learning is communal. Elders, parents, and teachers collaborate in a non-hierarchical structure. Education here isn't just a transaction of facts. It's an inquiry-based, virtue-driven journey that literally involves music, rhythm, and the entire surrounding community working together to raise a child.
Section 5. Brown, Law, and Integration.
And that brings us to a really complex legal and societal question regarding integration and the lasting legacy of the landmark Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education. While Brown v. Board rightfully dismantled legal segregation, historical critiques points out a pretty painful reality. Integration has not universally resulted in equal educational opportunities for Black children. In fact, the legal victory of integration sometimes resulted in a severe cultural loss, as Black students were assimilated into environments and curriculums that actively marginalized their heritage. Because of this, some researchers point to historically Black colleges and ACE immersion schools as environments uniquely equipped to rebuild that cultural pride and self-esteem.
Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, doesn't a specifically Afrocentric school go against the whole spirit of integration? Well, the legal theorists in the research argue that it absolutely does not. They frame it as a logical, legally sound remedy. Think about it. If an Afrocentric curriculum successfully raises academic achievement by objective standards while simultaneously instilling profound cultural pride and does all of this in a non-exclusionary way that warmly welcomes non-Black students, then it acts as a highly appropriate remedial device. Under this view, it's completely consistent with Brown's primary premise, which is that absolutely no child should be educationally disadvantaged because of their race.
Section 6. The Stepping Stone to Multiculturalism.
At the end of the day, Afrocentric education doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It positions itself right inside a much larger conversation about global diversity. Researchers consistently highlight that developing a positive ethnic and racial identity actively protects young minds from race-based trauma. Think of it like putting on a really strong suit of armor or a thick, warm coat before stepping out into a harsh winter storm. By affirming a child's identity early on, this framework provides that necessary foundation of self-worth. You have to be secure and confident in exactly who you are before you can successfully navigate a wider, diverse world.
Which ties right into a really interesting revelation about what multiculturalism actually means. True global citizenship requires recognizing that all humans have contributed to world development and the flow of knowledge. Afrocentrists contend that true multiculturalism simply cannot be achieved while we retain a purely Eurocentric view of education. So here's the big takeaway. In order to deeply understand the world around them, students must first deeply understand their own heritage. Only then can they relate psychologically and equally to other cultures, appreciating global contributions without losing their own sense of self.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty big legal and ethical question to ponder. Can true multiculturalism ever be achieved without first centering the marginalized? Afrocentric education proposes that to fix a broken system, we can't just tinker with the testing metrics. We have to fundamentally change the lens. It's a bold, deeply fascinating approach to rethinking how we educate, empower, and build up the next generation of thinkers. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpack the research on this vital topic. Keep asking questions, keep challenging the baseline, and keep seeking to understand the hidden frameworks that shape our world.